I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Congressman Lee Zeldin questioned Antony Blinken about the Iran nuclear deal during a Foreign Affairs Committee hearing on Thursday. He directly asked Blinken why a new nuclear deal between the U.S. and Iran would not be considered a treaty. The New York Republican then asked the Secretary of State if he could provide the definition of treaty. Take a listen to the full exchange.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. I wanted to follow up on some of the questions and comments brought up earlier related to the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA. When Secretary of State John Kerry was here, sitting where you are nearly 7 years ago, he was asked about why it wasn't submitted to JCPOA, why the JCPOA wasn't submitted to Congress as a treaty. And he essentially was stating that the reason why it wasn't submitted was because of difficulty getting it passed. Now this is relevant again as the Biden administration may be entering into a nuclear deal with Iran. Why wouldn't this be a treaty?
Thank you, Congressman. I think as I noted a short while ago, many, in fact most, arms control, non-proliferation agreements that are multilateral in nature, as this one is, are actually not submitted to as treaties. If you go back through the long history of that, many are not.
Yeah, I'm asking why not. I'm asking why wouldn't a nuclear deal similar to the JCPOA, why would that not be a treaty?
Because in many instances, doing it in the way that we would do it gives us much greater flexibility to make sure that if, for example, there's a violation of the agreement by the Iranians, we can act quickly to deal with that. And
why wouldn't it be a treaty?
Again,
legally. What's the definition? Do you know what a treaty is? What's a treaty?
So the legally required obligations undertaken by both parties to an agreement.
So how would this not be a treaty? Under the definition you just provided, see, the thing is that you would then have to submit this to Congress, and then it would have to be ratified. And then it's non-binding if that doesn't happen. But the definition that you just provided, which is one that I would agree with, means that this is a treaty that under the United States Constitution would then get submitted to Congress for ratification. Mr. Vargas was asking about the sunset provisions. That was a good question, good point. I share his concern. Are you going to agree to a nuclear, is it possible you would agree to a nuclear agreement that doesn't change the sunset provision dates?
Congressman, the situation that we inherited is such as that, as I mentioned, Iran is moving vigorously forward on its nuclear program to the point that its breakout time.
I heard your answer. But the question is, would you agree to a nuclear deal that does not change the sunset provision dates?
We are looking at getting back into mutual compliance with the agreement. That includes the various provisions that were in the agreement from the start, including the sunsets, the most important sunsets in the agreement, that is on the stockpile that Iran is allowed to have of material and the processing speed of the centrifuges and enrichment capacity. Those provisions remain in place for almost another decade. The history of arms control agreements in the past.
I don't want the history of arms control agreements. I want to know if you would agree to a nuclear deal that does not change the sunset provision dates.
Without getting into the discussion.
I mean, it's a yes or no. Is the answer yes, you are willing to enter into a nuclear agreement that does not change the sunset provision date?
The answer is quite simply that what we are seeking to do is to get back into mutual compliance with the agreement that was reached 7 years ago,
we're looking for some straight answers
including the provisions
here,
that are in that
Secretary.
agreement, and those include the sunset provisions.
But would you be willing to enter into an agreement that does not change the sunset provisions? And if you're not able to say yes or no to that, we're not going to assume that you're there fighting for a change to the sunset provisions because you're not even telling us that. Why would we expect that you're drawing a tougher stance on the Iranians than you're willing to say to Congress and to the American people? You said that you're going to follow NARA. Does that mean that you would submit the entire agreement?
The lawyers will look at that, are looking at that. If they make a determination that under INARA there are requirements that we have, of course, we will follow those.
So you can't make a commitment that you would submit the entire agreement?
I can tell you, again, that we will follow the law, and we will follow INARA, and whatever it requires.
Are you saying that, okay, whatever, let's say your attorneys tell you that you don't have to submit the entire agreement. Would you commit to us that you would submit the entire agreement to Congress anyway?
We will follow the law.
You're not willing to make a commitment that you'll submit the entire agreement?
My commitment is to follow the
law. Now, under INARA, the clock starts once the entire agreement is submitted. So the clock for reviewing it then wouldn't start, correct?
Again, what I can tell you and what I can commit to, as always, is we will follow the law, including, of course, NR.
Okay. I don't know, and this is not the right setting to get into the reports of added security for your predecessor and other issues. We are very concerned about that, and especially with regards to negotiations with Iran and how that relates. Just know that there's a massive concern with negotiating with Iran while that may be ongoing to the extent of a conversation that we can't have here. I yield back.
I appreciate that, and I'm happy to follow up.